Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Ron Kelley, and welcome to our panel discussion on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We have some esteemed panelists here with us today, and we are going to talk about all things MLK, from history to his image, to his impact, to his legacy. And this is going to be a very exciting discussion. It's going to move fast. It's going to be both interesting for youth and adults. So let's get right into it and learn all about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, first, I want to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to go in the order of my screen as I see them. So as I announce their names, I'm going to unmute them, and they will give a brief introduction of who they are. So when you start hearing these great African-American gentlemen speaking today, you will know all about them and their background. First, I am going to Kevin Carolina from New Jersey. Kevin, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Carolina. I am a recent graduate of Rutgers University with a degree in public health, and I'll be matriculating into Sidney Kimmel Medical College this summer to study medicine.
Excellent. Glad to have you, Mr. Carolina, and future Dr. Carolina. So glad to have you here. Next, we have a very special gentleman from here in San Antonio, a graduate of Trinity University that I've had a chance to mentor and watch him grow and excel in the education field. Mr. Jordan Williams, please introduce yourself. All right, I'm going to unmute you, and here we go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Williams. I graduated from Trinity University, and now I'm in the master's program at UTSA.
Excellent, excellent. Glad to have you, Jordan. And next we have one of the board members. As you notice, this event is sponsored by the National Mentoring Foundation, which is a mentoring foundation that I serve as CEO currently of. And one of our esteemed board members is with us today, Dr. Ronald Washington. If you could introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ron Washington. I'm an associate professor at the University of Incarnate Word. I'm the coordinator of the Management Information Systems program there.
Excellent. Always great to see you, Dr. Washington. And last but not least, I have one of my fraternity brothers in Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, Mr. Alvin Brown. If you would like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you. Okay, I think you're unmuted now. 1 second, can't hear you yet. Let's try it again. There it is.
There we go. Good afternoon. I'm Alvin Brown. As Dr. Kelley mentioned, I am a fraternity brother at the San Antonio Alumni Chapter. I'm the vice chair for the Senior Kappa Committee. And I just happen to be born on the same day as Dr. King, January 15th.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about your career background and your degrees.
Okay, I am a graduate of the University of Iowa, majored in industrial relations and marketing. I also matriculated at the Cleveland State University College of Law and the private sector as well as the government sector in contracting, small business, and a couple of various and sundry things, but mostly now I'm retired from really working, but my work is with the fraternity. I've served as the advisor to the undergraduate chapter at Omicron Tau. I'm currently the vice chair for the senior Kappas. I've also worked in the Kappa Lead program as an advisor.
Excellent. That is excellent. I know you very well for your work with the youth, and that's going to be a major part of our discussion today. So we are glad to have you. So let's get right into it because the clock is ticking and I have some questions for you that could last the entire session. That's how deep these questions are going to get, but we're going to just have to fire off quick answers because I want to get through all of them. I'm going to feel really bad if I have some of these good questions still on the list that are left unchecked on the list. So we're going to go in order of the screen screen, and it's going to start with Mr. Carolina. And I see that we have some guests that are joining us in our audience. We're glad to have you today. We are doing our recording now for this program that will hopefully air for many years to come. Youth can go onto YouTube and learn all about MLK and learn more about his legacy through this video that will live on for many, many years due to the greatness of our internet and being able to reach the world through this technology. So Mr. Carolina, I just unmuted you for this question. Dr. King would have been 93 years old this year. So on his birthday, January 15th, yesterday, he would have been 93 years old. Considering that age, and he would have been likely alive, to this day. Many people from his era lived, there are a lot of those great civil rights legends who are in their 90s, right now. He could possibly still be alive. What would he have accomplished? I want you to dream with me really quick, on this and think about what would he possibly have accomplished? Would he have been the first Black president? Would he have some large mega church that we can not only imagine how big that could be. What could you go into your imagination and think about what could he have accomplished if his life hadn't been taken so early?
It's a really great question. Honestly, the possibilities are somewhat endless, really. But when you consider what Dr. King was able to accomplish in such a short period of time, you can only imagine what he would have done by now. What I would say he could have accomplished in his life, if he was still alive today, would definitely be to further the cause of social justice that he was really pushing for. I think that we would definitely be a lot further along in our progress towards that. And I also think that given some of the movements that are present right now, that he would also be in close collaboration with them, specifically the Black Lives Matter movement. Yeah, I think that's where he would be at this time.
Excellent. Mr. Williams, what do you think about that? I want you to use your imagination and let's get specific and think of what are some things that he would have possibly accomplished. Being he accomplished, as those that may not know, he was assassinated at the young age of 39. We see Dr. King and we imagine an older man. He was not an older man. He was a young man, but we have so much respect for him. When we see him, we assume he's a lot older. He was a lot older. What do you think, Jordan? What could he have accomplished? Let's think of some things that he would have possibly accomplished.
I think he would have accomplished a lot. One including is president for sure. I think that he had such a great mind, and a lot of his followers, such as myself and others included, definitely would have continued to follow him and would have destined to be great.
Excellent, excellent. All right, I'm gonna go on to Dr. Washington. What is your opinion? What do you think? Any wild ideas? What could he have accomplished?
Well, my focus has always been the work that he's done in organizing businesses, work with the sanitation movement, the bus movement. I think he would have had a really big influence on Black enterprise in a sense, and that he would have been able to say, these are the things that we're pushing for. One of the things that Dr. King had mentioned in the time that he worked with these organizations, that organizations needed visionaries, they needed partners, and they needed the workers. And those people had to come together in order to accomplish that mission. So I think he would have really looked about the opportunities that technology provides for business and the opportunities that it provides, especially now for entrepreneurship. So I think he probably would have been involved in that in some level.
Excellent, excellent. Mr. Brown, last but not least, what do you think? Anything would he have been, leading the United Nations, maybe, international level things? What are some of those wide-ranging things that you think Dr. King could have accomplished?
I think he probably would not have taken a political avenue. He would have remained a private citizen, a public private citizen. I agree with Dr. Washington with the I think being a leader of the various organizations. I honestly believe had he still been here, we would have had more continuity between the organizations as the new organization like Black Lives Matter. I think those, even though he had had disagreements with CORE and some other organizations, I think by this time things would have coalesced more than they have.
Right. Excellent, excellent from everyone. Those are great. Just thinking about what could possibly be. We mentioned the first Black president thing, and just think someone preceding President Obama. That's almost unfathomable to think of that. But that door would have been open even more for President Obama to accomplish even more things than he did. So it's just a chain of events at that point. So moving on to the next one. Dr. King's career, a lot of times we don't understand what his career, a lot of young people ask, well, what was his job? Well, his job, he was a pastor. So we look at that and we look at the Black church and we look at dwindling numbers of youth who are involved currently in the Black church. And it makes me wonder, there was really a reason that Dr. King and Andrew Young and all of those great civil rights leaders, their background was being a pastor. That really says something that's a position we really need in the Black community. But unfortunately, on my end, I don't really see many young men who are in the pipeline to lead the Black church. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Carolina? What are your thoughts on that? Are there some young Black men in the line to lead the Black church? Do you know of anyone at your university who's saying, I want to be a minister? Like, how does that leadership pipeline look?
Yes, you're right. Unfortunately, that really isn't as prevalent these days. Truth be told, the only person I really know that was interested in going that avenue was Mr. Amos Jackson, who I met through this program. But other than that, I don't know a lot of people that are interested in pursuing that. My guess would have to be that unfortunately, some of the youth have had pretty negative experiences within the church for numerous reasons that really push them to go a different direction when it comes to pursuing a certain career path and like trying to take their own social justice or civil rights works outside of the church.
Right. Interesting. Well, now you're from the East Coast. You're born and raised in New Jersey?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what are the options? I've heard that especially on the East Coast that the Black church among young people is not as popular. You saw the rise of the Nation of Islam in the 90s. In my era, as I was graduating from high school, you saw the popularity of that during that era. And I'm asking you, basically, is there something else that's appealing to the youth and as far as spirituality? I know that void was filled during the Black Power movement and things like that. From the East Coast, from that side, what kind of fills that void for youth?
I think that for the youth now, given the ability, given the fact that we have like the internet and like social media, we're able to be more open to a lot of like different religions and like to a lot of different points of view when it comes to God. And what I've noticed more, at least like amongst my peers, is that they don't say that they're necessarily religious, but they're more spiritual. They don't necessarily ascribe to just, one specific religion, but they take these different aspects of like other religions and cultures and they just, merge them together. Is what I've seen.
Very, very interesting. Now, continue that, Mr. Williams, continue in that thought. What do you think? Dr. King as a figure, as a pastor, is there a pipeline? Are there any young men that you know? I know I work with a lot of young men, and it seems that their focus is making money. That's what they're focused on, and they don't see spirituality as a career. They don't even envision that as a career. They're like, I want to be a doctor, lawyer, CEO, engineer. A lot of the things they want to do are tied to higher income professions. What do you think about that pipeline of young pastors? Let me unmute you. There we go.
I think that it isn't as prevalent, and also there's not a lot of young Black males that are following that lead behind Martin Luther King. And I think that there is some that may want to follow down that spirituality, but are a little scared or frightened too because of this well, stigma that's out there. If you follow God, then there may be some type of, judgment placed on you because of that.
Excellent, excellent observation. Dr. Washington, what do you think? You're on the academic level as a college professor. Do you encounter any young men who are in the theology program that are, aspiring, they're taking your class to learn business so that they can run their own church one day, so they could be a national leader like that? Is there any presence of that?
This is a really interesting question. I really think it's interesting because I'm of the mind, and I've come from the generation of as goes the church, so goes society. And the challenge, I think, that I see, so I'm a professor at a Catholic institution, University of Incarnate Word. And so at the University of Incarnate Word, as a faith-based organization and as an institution who is mostly and predominantly a liberal arts institution, our core values are faith, innovation, education, service, and truth. Okay, so in every course that we teach, there's a component of ethics. In every course that we teach, we try to in some way tie in students' faith, regardless of what that faith is, to kind of help them make those connections in society. The challenge that I see, though, as far as young people and what Mr. Carolina mentioned is spirituality, is that what it takes to be a faith leader and what it takes to maintain that role. There's a somewhat of an exclusivity to that. So spirituality gives the idea that there's this smorgasbord of religious principles that you can kind of mix together, put together, and make happen. And what really happens, in my personal view, when it comes to an individual that's going to take up that mantle of their faith, be it Islam, Judaism, Christianity, is a commitment. And one of those I'm all in type of deals that really, I don't want to say shields you, but it really kind of protects you from the criticisms, right? It's kind of like knowing who you are. So you hear a lot of young people, at least through my experience, it's just like, do you, know what I mean? Well, you got to know who you are first, And so I don't know that many young people, and I agree with Mr. Carolina and Mr. Williams, that students, young people in general, are looking for something, right? And our generation isn't really providing it for them. And so they've taken up that mantle to find it on their own. So when we talk about, individuals like Dr. King, who was a minister, right? I think this particular generation has taken it upon themselves to minister in different ways. Many of them don't even realize they're ministering, and so I think that if I could encourage anyone to follow that path of Dr. King, is to know that Dr. King's ministry, Dr. King's oratory skills did not simply reside in the four corners of their church. It's the thing that he did, the speaking that he did, the motivation that he did was out and amongst the people. And so I would encourage, if there are young people that are wondering, could you follow that path? I would say question whether you're already on it or not.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Mr. Brown, same question. We're just still trying to figure it out. How do we create that pipeline? Since the other panelists kind of explored it, let's kind of round it down to how do we create? Because we've almost realized that there is not a pipeline. How do we possibly create that so that our historic Black churches do have leaders that take over at some point from the younger generation?
I really think that a lot of that talking with young men, a lot of what I did with the Kappa League, you're teaching young men about how to be young men and things to do, but education is a large part of that. And to me, unless we can focus from what's good for me to what's good for us, it's a hard road to hoe. And give that. I mean, you're in that situation of making money, as you mentioned. That's the real. There's so much importance put on making the dollar rich. And right. I think also the idea of being more progressive or being, having a great ambition, the church as we know it or religion is a bit slow. You're not going fast enough for me. We need to do this on a faster rate. So let me do it myself. And if some things from the spiritual side of life comes involved and it fits.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Yes. Yes. Had a little internet difficulties right there, but we're working through it. Y'all, this is bringing me back to another part of the career kind of lifestyle aspect. And I'm going to ask you this question. Are there any activists in the pipeline? So we discussed the minister side of it, but we know Dr. King as an activist. I saw during the Black Lives Matter movement, a few young people emerge, in social media who were activists, but it seems like that's died down. I don't see that anymore. Are there any activists coming in the pipeline from the younger generation? Mr. Carolina, you first. Yes.
That's a really interesting question, because it seems as though that nowadays the definition of activist is somewhat changing, right? Is the activist the person that is, like, does activism kind of like, mean that you have to conduct this grandiose, march or like movement? Or does it start out with you making a post, bringing awareness to some type of issue, and then it's going viral now? If we're looking at it from the perspective of utilizing social media, where it only takes one post to go viral and to be reposted, then yes, I would say that we do have a lot of activism that's going on nowadays, because a lot of things that were kind of like swept under the rug, are now becoming a lot more, people are becoming a lot more aware of it. For example, like I remember someone hearing that people are somewhat surprised by the fact that all this police brutality is going on all over the country. But I've also heard someone that's a lot older that said, hey, it's not as if that, this hasn't been going on in the past. It's more so that now we have a camera and that's being spread around a lot more. So I would say that, just, the net of it is that, yes, we do have a lot of activists that are coming up along the pipeline, and that, nowadays anyone for the most part could participate in any kind of like form of activism, really. And that just like overall, the definition of activism has definitely changed, between now and, during the civil rights movement, in my opinion.
Okay, Mr. Williams, same question. Are there any activists? Do you know any friends who are like, hey, let's go protest this, let's take a stand as far as that? I really don't see that too much in the students that I encounter, through the educational system. And you're also a teacher, a classroom teacher. Do you see any presence of activism among the students? Is there any interest in those type of topics?
I believe there's activism all around us. One in which is definitely coming from outside the Black community. I have some white counterparts who are definitely involved in standing up for the Black community. And also to mention the younger generation that I teach, they are all about drawing pictures and, reaching out to teachers such as myself to say, hey, can we do this type of collaboration, or can we talk amongst our peers about this situation that we saw with one of our peers? I think that it's a lot of people that are standing up.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Dr. Washington, with the whole activism thing, is there still that stigma attached to it? I know in our generation, when you and I, it was kind of taught to really stay away from all that radical stuff. You won't get a job if you're doing that. And, you were taught to just, watch how radical you become. But then as things happen in society, you're like, wait a minute, at some point I got to stand up for what I believe in. How do those stigmas apply, and does it exist in the pipeline, or will there be activists, or will this new generation be focused more on their personal accomplishments?
Another interesting question. So when I look at that whole idea of the stigma, right? When I view this, my thing is, well, if the way someone views you based on your desire to go out and make noise about this interest, maybe you ain't an activist, right? If something like that scares you off, maybe you ain't an activist. But what I do see, and I again agree with the two young men on this panel, you have to redefine activism. When you look at the Arab Spring, when you look at Black Lives Matter, when you look at the women's movement, all of those things were generated out of social media and young people's ability. And what I would love to do is I would love to look at the civil rights movement and pull it all into today. What would the civil rights look like today if they had access to social media, to cameras and things like that? It would be crazy interesting. As far as activists in the pipeline, quite honestly, all the ones I see are young ladies. We have a couple of young ladies at UIW that are outstanding and really pushing the envelope. One of them is Miss Dorsey, Safi Dorsey, and they are constantly pushing our university to acknowledge, recognize the diversity that we may or may not have in their view, because diversity is many, it's different. You know what I mean? Diversity isn't how many people of this race or that race. Diversity is the ability to take those individuals culturally and bring them into the whole. And that, again, that's what we try to do. But what I do see, and I'm very proud of the young women that I see that are in this movement, how they look up to the Stacey Abrams of the world. And I would really hope, and I'm not really sure why, I would really hope that there are, and I know, these two young men are, whether they consider themselves activists or not, because ultimately, if you're out there doing the work, you activists, you're doing it. If you're standing in front of the class, if you're getting your education, if you're making that path, whether you see the pebble that you pull out of the way of another person or the boulder you roll out, you're supporting that ideal of moving this whole thing forward. Are there in the pipeline? Absolutely. Do we know who they all are? Maybe not, if you're not as engaged with social media. Can there be more? Should there be more? Yes, there should. But I really don't think that we could necessarily say that, because we didn't see it on the street today, that it ain't happening, because there's still quite a bit of things going on in those social media platforms that are moving people forward. There are things that, the fraternal organizations and the sorority organizations, they're doing that we don't see. There are things that are happening in the classroom. And on the last note, Ron, because I don't want to keep it too long, is, I would say it better be happening, because what's coming down the pike ain't fun, and you better be ready for it.
Excellent answer. Great, great. On to Mr. Brown. From your generation, I'm going to assume that you were there. You were part of a lot of the civil rights discussions and things going on. In this topic of activism, did you have any encounters with Martin Luther King's movement as that was going, with the Malcolm X times, with the emergence of the Black Panther movement? How did that, I know you've traveled all over the United States. What was it like being there during those years? What was that feeling of activism like? And give me some examples of some of the guys from your era that were very active in that, and how did it affect them, and how did it all play out in the end?
Well, I guess the closest I got to Dr. King was in '63, I guess it was, in the march in Detroit. There was so much enthusiasm. He just created an idea of there are things we can do. We can be better. The Black Panthers wasn't so much in Detroit, but moving around the country, you could see that was one of those. You aren't moving fast enough. We got to get this thing done. If we don't get it done now, we may not get it done. A couple of gentlemen that I knew growing up that were really involved. I wasn't as involved as they were, but they were really activists, generally became leaders in the community. A couple of ministers, school teachers, every walk of life. They became part of the movement, and along with Dr. Washington, there better be something going on. And even though we don't see it, things are happening. And to the point of women being involved, more young ladies being involved, they've always been involved. They just did not get the spotlight like men do. Fannie Lou Hamer and all the ladies that were in the background doing things just did not get the there. They've always still there. And now it's kind of quiet, at least from my perspective. Young ladies, women, men, there, but it's on a lower key. They don't want that. So if you look around, they're there. They're trying to fill voting position. They've always been there. They're there. They just aren't as loud as they used to be. So maybe it's a case of working inside out.
Okay.
It is. It's there. It's just not as big as.
Okay. Now that made me advance to a question I had later in the program, because I was going to ask this later, but this will tie directly into what we alluded to several times through several of the panelists. One question that I have here on my list is, who would be the female equivalent to MLK? So since that kind of came up, let's explore that, because I don't believe we have a female equivalent because of gender discrimination against women. Women were always put to the back of the movement, and they're this person as Rosa Parks who just sparked this one part of it, but she wasn't the leader. It's always placed in the background. And that was just a reflection of the 1950s and 60s in America. That was the traditional family structure. Dad goes to work, mom stays at home, 2 kids, a house, white picket fence, all of that stuff. So let's explore, since our females now have more power, more recognition, and as we said, they're the foundation of the movement right now. Who would you say would be the female equivalent in history, or someone coming up that has the potential with that? Let's explore that a little bit. Let's start us off, Mr. Caroline.
Actually, could you please skip me? I want to try to give this a bit more.
I was going to say, this is kind of an open one. As I'm thinking myself, I'm still thinking, let's see who has something. Mr. Williams, you got anybody in mind yet?
I would say definitely, to piggyback off of Dr. Washington, Stacey Abrams definitely is a top pick for me. And I would say following her would be Michelle Obama.
Excellent.
Just because both of those ladies are all about equity and inclusion.
Yes. And let's talk about Michelle Obama, because I think we take her for granted, because if you look at this, look at what she did to the first lady position. The first lady position is really in the background, but Michelle Obama was like a 1A to President Obama. It wasn't a 1-2, it was like 1 and 1A. Like, she was just as visible and just as active. So I think we really need to give her more credit. She made the first lady a real position. That went from a honorary title to like that was a real position in the government, under her. And you see, we don't really have that right now. That prominence has disappeared as far as that, because it was that Michelle Obama electricity, that personality she has. What do you think about that, Dr. Washington? The potential of Michelle Obama, what does her future look like?
I'm a Stacey Abrams fan. I'm all in with Stacey Abrams. Absolutely, Miss Obama has all the intellectual flair. She's there. Stacey Abrams, for me, however, she is straight up in the mix. Her father was actually a minister, I believe, and so if you interesting though, Mr. Williams brought that up because they both have somewhat similar upbringings in with Miss Obama. Her father, factory worker, but he spent a lot. I mean, he worked really hard. I mean, it was what he did. And the same with Stacey Abrams' dad, and both of them came out of learning environments that didn't necessarily promote them for what they were really capable of doing. And in Miss Obama's book, she talks about, the challenges that she faced going into an Ivy League school, being the one Black woman and so yeah. But to me, Stacey Abrams is, and she's all that bag of chips to me. I think, she has the oratory skills that, certainly Miss Obama has, but she's a different kind of igniter, I think. Miss Obama certainly, I think her popularity would certainly benefit in anything. But I just think Stacey Abrams is somebody that you can drop on. For me, she has a certain style that motivates in her speech. It's a direct, you need to get it done kind of thing.
Got it. That's right. Now, Mr. Brown, I want you to take this in another direction, because I think this is what we want from Vice President Kamala Harris. What does Vice President Harris need to do now in this? This is the start of a new year. The administration has gotten broken in and everything. How can she emerge? Because she's in the position. She's there. What are some things that she could do to really emerge as that prominent, the leader, the Black female representative for our race?
It's funny you should mention that, because I was going to bring her up as one of those people. And in my estimation, what she really needs to do is to be more, have more experience. I'm sure she's doing a lot of things in her position that we never hear about. And if you hear about it, it doesn't exist. So she's been very quiet this first year, maybe a learning year, maybe,
I think
she needs greater exposure now, more exposure. Here's what I was working.
Excellent. That's right. Yeah. And
I had to go with Dr. Washington. Stacey Abrams has to be the number one.
Okay. Yes. And I definitely have faith in Vice President Harris, because that is the kind of word on the street, is the visibility aspect. But that's the easy part. The visibility, that can be done in today's era. So, I believe she has a plan, that you don't just come out, blazing, right out of the gate. I think her plan is very long-term and designed to lead into the presidency. See, that's the part that we miss, that the strategy to lead into the presidency is a completely different strategy. Like, any thoughts on that from anyone? We'll open that one up.
I agree with on that perspective. The problem with that, again, is, okay, what are we doing now? We got to do this now. And I understand the laying out the plan to get to where you want to go and do that. But in today's society, when, like, we're talking about the social aspect of the platforms, what you see is what, and it's not necessary to be out there with or speed or plan up. Let's put it that way.
That's right. Okay, Mr. Carolina, I think we didn't get to you. Any thoughts? You thought of give us a new name. What is one that we maybe haven't used? I'm gonna think of a few others. Anything on that? Let me unmute you. There we go.
See, that's what makes it so difficult, because truth be told, I'm also in the same boat of like between Stacey Abrams and Michelle Obama. So definitely like with Michelle Obama, right? Just her elegance, the way that she presents herself, and even her mindset of like when people go low, you go high. And they ultimately want to, you know, be the bigger person, which I definitely do think that Dr. King really did personify. But when it comes to Stacey Abrams, I think that what wins it over for me was just her dedication to being within the community. You know, just that grassroots sort of activism, like literally getting directly to the people in order to really create change that does make me lean more towards her in terms of like, you know, being the modern day Dr. King. Kind of going back over to the Kamala Harris discussion, I do think that, you know, I agree with the fact that visibility is key, and that trying to be sure that you establish those relationships with the communities that were behind you is also very important. You know, kind of like within the barbershop, you already know the kind of like the banter that occurs there. And from what I'm hearing from a lot of people, at least like in my area, is this somewhat distrust within her, that she kind of utilized the whole, you know, Black identity, I put this in air quotes, just to kind of like, you know, make it into office. And I think that if like going forward that she does want to go and take this route of ultimately become the president of the United States, that's a significant obstacle that she has to overcome. And the main way that you do that is by getting down within the community, and by, you know, having specific policies and like actions taken that are definitely publicized, that are going to, you know, regain that trust within the community.
All right, great description. You covered all the points. I'm going to make it even harder for everyone right now, because we're going to explore the fact and concept of who is the next MLK. So we've looked at the female perspective, and we know, unfortunately, in our society, it's a lot easier to emerge this male leader because that's what everyone looks for. So a male would be already in position to be the next Dr. King. Is it Barack Obama? Does he all of a sudden change his post-presidency mission and expand it to something that's going to impact us greatly in the next 10 years? Who is it? I'm about to throw out some extra names, and I'm going to leave it to you all. Is there possibly someone in the pipeline who could have that big of an impact? Or is there someone we don't know? Is there someone that we may have to wait for the next generation for it? Well, let's go in a different order. Dr. Washington, I'm going to let you start this one off with that. Is there anyone?
Oh yeah, and I'm so from this is so cool, because this brother won the election there as senator in Georgia, and I cannot for the life of me capture his name in my mind at the moment. But he beat out the representative, the former Georgia representative. It's not Osthoff, but he's a minister in Georgia.
Yeah, is that the senator, the senator, minister of Ebenezer Church?
Right. And oddly enough, preaching at the church that Dr. King preached at.
Yeah.
Right.
But what I've seen is this brother has stood on the floor of the Senate and given some, I mean, it was like he was preaching. And if they wasn't hearing him, I don't know, but he's articulate, he's bright, he's spiritual, he's dedicated to his community. You know, Warnock is just, I think the platform that he has right now is really going to elevate him way more, because I mean, the visibility, you know, that Mr. Carolina was talking about, all of that. I mean, this is put him on a platform. He will be noticed. He will literally be able, in my opinion, to go back into his community and make some changes. Matter of fact, those that might want to keep him down might want to try and keep him in the Senate where they can turn around and at least kind of curtail him a little bit with the whole idea of the filibuster. But I think once he's back in the community, it's going to be nonstop. And if him and Stacey Abrams ever get together, it's going to be crazy.
Right. Senator Raphael Warnock.
Warnock.
The thing that his name was so prominent, and I remember feeling so helpless because in that we were wondering, how can we participate? What can we do? Do you remember how tight that race was and how important that race was? And that was just strictly a Georgia thing. Us in Texas were just out of the loop as far as that. But yes, Senator Warnock is definitely in that pipeline. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Mr. Williams, what do you think? Any prominent names that have become popular that have the potential? I mean, let's go into hip hop. I mean, could, Jay-Z, could he possibly have an impact that's this great, financially or business wise? Let's put some wild thoughts. How far can we go with this?
This is a very challenging question to me because I think that there is quite a few of men that I believe symbolize what Martin Luther King stood for. And one in which that comes to mind is Colin Kaepernick. And the reason being is because his movement was nonviolent. He also standing up for the Black community in such a way where people are, just amazed at how he's doing it. And he's also combating a conglomerate of a company, which is the NFL, right? So I think that his movement right now is going well. And I think that he's standing up for something that is of a good cause, right? And yeah, so I think that also each of us has our own Martin Luther King legacy inside of us, which is to educate and teach someone critically, to think critically, and to become a modern day MLK.
Excellent. And I'm glad you brought up Colin Kaepernick. There's so that he hadn't even crossed my mind because it's unfortunate that America is such a what have you done for me lately country. Like if you're not in the news right now, where you're not on the tip of our tongue. But Colin Kaepernick, we can, Mr. Brown, Mr. Carolina, any of you who hasn't spoke on this, and you can address this with him. He's actually doing it with a silent movement because you don't see Colin Kaepernick in front of the microphone. He's not trying to get attention. We're almost just begging to hear from him. The last I heard, a lot of buzz about his Netflix special, as far as that, but you don't hear of him, speaking. I know he does do speaking engagements, but he's not the person that's like seeking attention or seeking the limelight. What are your thoughts on him, Colin Kaepernick? Does he need to make any adjustments to his plan, considering his popularity?
I think if this is tough, if excuse me, like you were saying, he's very quiet about what he's doing. Quiet in the sense that there's not a big light on it. So unless you're really sort of following, you really don't know a lot about what he's doing and his approach to things. But like Kamala Harris, if he got a little more attention to pull more people to know what he's doing and pull more people into what he's trying to do, I think that would go a long way. Jay-Z, and others in that business, to me, are the finance folks, the folks that get behind, a Stacey Abrams or a Kaepernick. That's where they lie. I don't see them being, running for Senate or House of Representatives, although it's not out of the realm of possibility. In their position, they are the financiers of causes.
Right. Let's explore that a little bit, because I see a power that Jay-Z and Kanye and all of them have that they may not realize. One of the things that they can do, they can put a bug in the ear of the youth through music. For example, what if all of the hip hop started having a positive Black image all of a sudden? I mean, that's what happened to me. When I was in high school, when Public Enemy came out, all rap was all in tune with each other, and everybody, we were wearing the Black medallions and all of that. What if that came back? What if those powerful people start planting those messages, in the music, instead of talking about rims and money and things like that? What if you start putting those messages in there? Miss Carolina, what do you think? Unmute you. Oh, there we go.
See, that's a really great point. And that's something that I think is like, there are some artists that are out there that actually do, utilize that. Like, for example, there's the artist No Name, who's based out of Chicago, who's like, really on the front lines in terms of like, social activism. And there's even artists, such as, Kendrick Lamar, that also bring up those types of, like those themes into their music. But I think that unfortunately, the way that music is nowadays is that it's a lot more business oriented, and that they're somewhat tailoring their music to a certain type of demographic that would have a wider, universal appeal. Because unfortunately, just like with the control that like some of these like record producers have over the artists, like, and it can, to the point where they can even limit the type of music that's even coming out, means that, they kind of have to like walk a certain type of a fine line. Like, yes, they definitely do have that influence over the youth, and they have the potential to do a lot of great things, but they have to go about it a certain way. I also keep in mind too, that like, because of the fact that they need to sell records, that, the biggest demographic of people that do buy into like rap music are, I think it was like, young white men. And unfortunately, they're not necessarily, as open, like to a certain extent, to like hearing that type of message.
Right. Excellent observation. Oh yeah, that's it. Now we are down to our last question. That went fast. Wasn't that the fastest hour ever right there? Really, really quick. I'm going to end it with this. I want each of you to address this, because all of this discussion that we do on issues like this is just discussion unless there is an action plan and a follow-up. Because as we talked about activism, what we're doing right now is activism by discussing Dr. King, whereas, I haven't heard of any discussions of Dr. King. I just hear of, things we may do traditionally on MLK Day, but there's not a lot of drive to push the needle and create the next MLK and inspire the youth. So we're going to end it like this. I'm going to go to each of you individually, and to apply an action plan to this, I want to ask you, what should we be doing each year on MLK Day? So we're recording this here on Sunday, and MLK Day is tomorrow when we will air this. Every year, what should we be doing? What is one thing or just one idea that we can do so that once a year we're reminded of the big picture and fighting for our rights and those things like that? Mr. Carolina, here you go. You're up.
Yeah, so I know that with certain organizations, they utilize Martin Luther King Day for a day of service, right? And I definitely do think that's very important in order to try to honor Dr. King's memory, because he was very community oriented. But I also think that it should be a time for us to really sit back and reflect on the progress that's being made. I know that within the realm of public health that they utilize this thing called the Healthy People 2020, which is basically a list of certain objectives and goals that they want to reach by a certain year. I think it's like, every 10 years that they have this. And I think that for Dr. King Day, every single year, that we should basically come up with a plan, or at least an idea of certain things that we want to have achieved by, I guess like a certain, like, let's just say maybe like 5 years, and we kind of reevaluate that every single Dr. Martin Luther King Day. And then we utilize that as a way to, okay, by this next day, or like by this like next year, what can we do in order to ensure that by the end of this time period that our goals are, specifically accomplished? And then we kind of reevaluate those goals like every single 5 years, similar to like what they do in the Healthy People. I think that'd be interesting.
Perfect, perfect. Great answer. And I'll go next as we're going in order. My idea is every MLK Day on that Monday, talk to a child, your grandson, daughter, son, nephew, cousin. Sit down with some child and explain his story of who he is. Because I feel like if we don't do that, I don't think he'll become forgotten, but we will have a generation who does not realize how big he was and still is. My generation got it because we watched the MLK Day. As of 2000 was the first time that all 50 states recognized the holiday. So we got to witness this become a federal holiday and the process. So we know how big he was. But if we're not careful, if we don't share the story, you'll have a generation that just see him as Babe Ruth. When I hear that in baseball, I know Babe Ruth was the greatest baseball player of all time. I've never seen Babe Ruth play. I don't really know how good Babe Ruth was. Unfortunately, Bill Russell. I know Michael Jordan. I watched Michael Jordan. I know Bill Russell has the most championships, but it doesn't have that same impact. We can't afford to let that happen with MLK. So I say, tell the story. That's my contribution. Tell the story to a child, a different youth each year, and hopefully it goes on. All right, Mr. Williams, what are your thoughts? Unmute you. Let's see. There we go.
Mine would be support Black businesses. As you know, in the 1950s, I believe, of Black Wall Street into Tuskegee. I believe that there was basically, I think that we should definitely support Black businesses because there has been a depletion over the years in the Black economy. So, yeah.
Great, great. And I'm glad you remember that we had not mentioned business, and we don't associate Dr. King with business, but Dr. King was good for business. You know how many Black businesses benefited from when he would come into town, when he would, from the marches, from all of that. It took an effort. It wasn't just him by himself. It took the entire community. Restaurants were important. All those people had to be fed, So there were a lot of people, thousands of people working together just when he would come to town. So business is a big part. Excellent, excellent. Dr. Washington, what do you have? What should we be doing every MLK Day?
Stop making it a single day. My frustration with this is that, we've been put in a situation where we've consolidated all of our accomplishments, all of our hopes, all of our dreams into a single day. We don't look at the legacy that brought Martin Luther King into position, from as far back as Frederick Douglass, all the way through. It's not a day. Some may not want to hear that, but it's not a day. I would absolutely take what Mr. Williams and what Mr. Carolina said, and I'd put it together. And I would say, in the same manner that the medical associations that Mr. Carolina deals with has a 20-point action plan with an achievement goal of X, and you take that and you tie it on to businesses and you say something like, okay, in 2022, we're gonna strive to have X amount of businesses, Black businesses, established and well supported in our community by 2023. Now you got a plan. And then it's not about every year coming back to the same point and ending at the last. I think they're all of it, the conversations, all of it, but it can't just be a day. And Hank Aaron wasn't the greatest, or Babe Ruth was Hank Aaron to me.
Babe Ruth wasn't.
That's right. That's right. Excellent. Excellent. Right. Let me add this. Right. What you said about making it not just a day, I think the placement of it being early in the year, being January, that could set us up to where that's the beginning. And then you have something once a month throughout the year. Like MLK Day sets the tone, and then throughout the year, you know, you celebrate Black business one month, Black History Month in February, you just focus on history. Well, March, we're gonna do business. April, focus on the kids, you know, and just expand it.
Well, again, Ron, that goes to, you know, that combining of what Mr. Williams, Ms. Carolina is saying. I'm so glad they said it. You know, you don't need a 20-point plan, you need a 12-month plan. In January, we're going to do this. In February, we're going to accomplish that. In March, we're going to accomplish this. And then we're going to roll back around in the coming January. We're going to assess and look what we're going to have done for that next year. And that's something that can be done per family, right? You know, every family can say January is going to be, I'm going to teach my children about, you know, the Black legacy. I think we've gotten to the point where we just don't, and I know we only got a little bit of time, so I know I got to go. I just really wish that we would look at the accomplishments within our communities. You know, we've got small business owners in our communities, man, who, you know, they don't get the recognition for what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? They're owning a business ain't easy, especially if you're a Black man or woman, because you don't get the same type financing and you don't get the same type support. So to be able to accomplish that, we need to support throughout the year. That's just, you know, my thought. You know, it should be MLK year with all legacy involved.
That's great. That's great. And all right, Mr. Brown, finish it out for us. What are your thoughts? What should we be doing? Tomorrow is the day. Let's start this one out as the first one where we do this. What should we be doing on that special day?
When I first came to San Antonio, I belonged to an organization, and every February, the organization would get together. We'd pick out 2 schools, and we would do Black history. We'd actually go into the schools and have an auditorium full of kids to bring this to. And the idea of once a month, I thought that was great. I thought this month we're going to do this month we're going to do that. And to keep that, the kids, like the kids aware of from whence they came, in a sense, and where they can go. And you were talking about sitting down with one kid. Let's sit down with a group of kids. You know, a school auditorium, school program.
Excellent.
And I've enjoyed this. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists. You know, this idea, Dr. Washington and I, we talked about it, you know, different ways, and it took on a life of its own, you know, to have this. And like I said, we're going to edit this into a really nice video that can just last forever and just be there. And look, of the 4 or 5 of us, or how many it is here, we're doing it. We're doing exactly what the question asked. By participating today, we're doing something that will have an impact. So I want to thank each and every one on the panel today. This has been great. You have no idea how this is going to impact someone out there who's going to look back and watch the video. I want to thank our audience members that have kind of been coming and going throughout this. I see Miss Christman, I believe. She's been with us for a while. I see Miss Anita Cox. So I want to recognize both of you. As far as everything, it has been an outstanding time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to wish a happy MLK Day to everyone here, and thank you for your participation. Thank you.